Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Creative Writing Lab. Today we will be talking about home. Whether you're a poet, a fiction writer, a nonfiction writer, your concept of home, the actual physical space, my case spaces, since I moved so much when I was a kid, or the idea of home, the people who make up home for you, that will affect your writing. Whether you ever leave home or not, whether you go back or not, whether you want to or not, home is such an intrinsic part of what we write. So, how do we write about home? Today, we will look at some poets that I think have done this really masterfully in really powerful and resonant ways. Let's start with a poem, or rather excerpts of a poem that captures for me some of the complexities of having a home, in this case, a house. So, what's it like to leave your house briefly and worry about the house, worry about the details of your house, and then what's it like to come back to your house after your time away? It's by Grace Paley. It's called Some Instructions. If you have a house, you must think about it all the time. As you reside in the house, so it must be a home in your mind. You must ask yourself, wherever you are, have I closed the front door? And the back door is often forgotten. Not against thieves necessarily, but the wind, oh, if it blows either door open, then the heat you've carefully nurtured with layers of dry hardwood and a couple of opposing green brought in to slow the fire, as well as the little pilot light. In the convenient gas backup, all of that care will be mocked because you have not kept the house on your mind. But these may actually be among the smaller concerns. For instance, the house could be settling. You may notice the thin, slanting line of light above the doors. You have to think about that. Luckily, you've been paying attention. The house's dryness can be humidified with vaporizers in each room and pots of water on the wood stove. Should you leave for the movies after dinner, ask yourself, have I turned down the thermometer and moved all wood paper away from the stove? The fiery result of excited distraction could be too terrible to describe. All right. So here we are. We worried about the house. I didn't read this part, but in the meanwhile, we've compared the house with its flaws and deficiencies and the work that goes into it. We've compared that house to newer houses, greener pastures, and spent some time away. And now here we are coming back home. So she says, coming up the road by foot or auto, the house can be addressed personally. House. In the excitement of work and travel to other people's houses with their interesting improvements, we thought of you often and spoke of your coziness. In winter, your courage, in wind and fire, your small airy rooms in humid summer, how you nestle in spring into the leaves and flowers of the hawthorn and the sage green, leaves of the Russian olive tree. House, you were not forgotten. So there actually is an exclamation mark every time the speaker addresses the house directly, and they say house. It's such a delightful poem. It's really wonderful because we get a good description of what the house might be like, might feel like, the maintenance, the work that goes into owning it and keeping it alive. But when the speaker addresses it directly, when the speaker speaks to it and praises it, accepting it for all that it is, it really becomes a home. All right. The Of course, a home is more than a house. And here's a poem that talks about losing home, even when the house is still standing. It's called A Locked House. It's by W.D. Snodgrass. Again, these are excerpts. It's most of the poem, but just for time's sake, I'm skipping a stanza or two. Here we go. As we drove back, crossing the hill, the house still, hidden in the trees, I always thought, a fool's fear, that it might have caught fire. Someone could have broken in, as if things must have been too good here. Still, we always found it locked tight, safe and sound. I mentioned that once as a joke. No doubt we spoke of the absurdity to fear some dour god's jealousy of our good fortune. From the farm next door, our neighbors saw no harm, came to the things we cared for here. What did we have to fear? Maybe I should have thought all such things rot, fall, barns, houses, furniture. We two are stronger than we were. Apart we've grown, together everything we own can burn. We know what counts, some such idea. We said as much. The house still stands, locked as it stood, untouched a good 2 years after you went. Some things passed in the settlement, some things slipped away. Enough's left that I come back sometimes. The theft and vandalism were our own. Maybe we should have known. This poem is such a quiet heartbreak. It really illustrates to me that the architecture, the things, the gathered possessions, the physical attributes of a house really don't make a home. And as we can see from the end of the poem, let's go back there. When the you being addressed, being spoken to in the poem, leaves. You read that section again? The house still stands, locked as it stood, untouched a good 2 years after you went. So it ceases to be a home, even though all the architecture, all the stuff is still there and it's still safe. You can't call it a home anymore. And it's just a really poignant and very beautifully put lesson in that, in how relationships and togetherness are really what craft and build and sustain a home. Here's a poem that is not explicitly titled home or house, but really captures the way homes of our childhood remain in our memory. It's very sweet, it's very beautiful, and it is by my dear friend Eric Fisher Stone. Here's Birthday Beetles. Each birthday, June bugs head-butted porch lights like mad angels. I loved their wings, brown olives, fizzing through the night. My strawberry hog-shaped birthday cake heralded summer joys. A space pirate, flying saucer captain, I led my dog lieutenant to planets. In our backyard, I made Taco Bell hot sauce packets joust with toothpick spears, their bloodstains still on the living room ceiling. A week before fall classes in August, I dug for dinosaur bones in Mom's garden. All the June bugs died, but I found their larvae, grubs moon pale, fingers greasing through soil. I wept to wait a whole school year for their wings. Such a delight, such a joy, this poem. I really loved how it captured the exuberance, the imagination, the play of childhood. So our speaker, and also I really loved how it captured relationship through gestures and artifacts. And so here, somebody loved the speaker enough to bake them a strawberry hog-shaped birthday cake, right? To know that they would love it. Here's the speaker, imaginative, playful. Hopefully they retain this imagination. Hopefully they retain this playfulness. They're a space pirate. They lead their dog, lieutenant, to planets in the backyard. So the backyard of this house can be a whole universe. And I especially love the detail of the Taco John hot sauce on the ceiling. That's still there. Kind of a wonderful memento, even though maybe mom didn't particularly enjoy it at the moment. But I really like that as a memento of the exuberance of childhood, and it really makes home distinct and memorable. And that last stanza with the June bugs that have died because they have such short lives, but their larvae, the grubs that are moon pale, that are still alive and waiting to become June bugs. So there's death, there's rebirth, all of which takes place within that home, right? All right. I gave you that slice of joy because this one's heavy. Here's a poem about refugees, those who have to leave home behind, who are often shunned where they try to rebuild one. I'll read excerpts, but there's also a visual version of this poem that I link in the description. This is by Warsan Shire. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You can only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burned threats into your neck. And even then you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airplane toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains beneath carriages. No one spends days and night in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than the journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison because prison is safer than a city on fire and one prison guard in the night. I'll stop there. I'll skip a little bit forward. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of the gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the ocean, drown, save, be hunger, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear, saying, leave, run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. That's such a devastating poem, but it's a necessary poem, and it has its own powerful beauty, because it really shows us what it takes to build a home elsewhere. And when people attack refugees, when people tell them to go back home, what they're really saying, right? All that history and damage that they're not seeing. Um, yeah. Okay. Let's do, while we're on the subject of a home left behind, let's talk about what happens when your home is so far away or behind you don't remember it fully. I mean, this can happen even when you haven't been away from home long. Memory is so tricky. Some things stay so vivid, and some things just are so clear as if we're looking at them right now, and some others disappear. So, a really wonderful thing about writing, I think, that many people don't realize until they're told they can do is bring your uncertainty to the page. If you don't remember something, if something is lost to you, you can write about that. You can write that you don't remember. Um, Here's a poem by Ghassan Zaqtan. I'm going to read you excerpts again. Here is the poet speaking about what is lost to memory. It's called Also the House. Near the camp was a river, and in our house were absentees and hands that will one day wake us in vain. I had just turned 7 while he was sitting in the shade, ironing his clothes, the blue jacket sagging over his shoulders. I paid no attention to the road or the 3 steps and didn't notice the carpet. I don't remember who was it that said to me or to another, "When you grow up, poetry will become your home." The dust that eats the memories always distances those folks. Yet their chairs appear from afar, from behind the hills and over the houses, to hang in an air of summer and holmoke. Those shaded chairs that reach the heart, her shoulders topped with 5 flowers. Which flowers are speech? Which flowers are silence? And I can't remember whether it was my uncle who stood at the door, whether we had palm and lotus trees in our house in Carme, whether my mother, who gave birth to me on the shelf, was folding our clothes behind our father's back so he could sleep. The watchdogs used to cry from the heat and poetry. Husseini of Jerusalem and Khidr, the mystic, were all in our house, as was my uncle who came from a pond. This house that's described here in Zaqtan's poem is such a sensory feast and yet a coast. We have so many details of the people who lived there, of the chairs, of the physical details, how it felt. We know who made this space a home, and yet there's so much that the speaker's forgotten. Home become even more luminous through what the poet is trying to remember of it. Here's an excerpt from William Stafford's One Home, which many of you in Iowa will resonate with. Mine was a Midwest home. You can keep your world. Plain black hats rode the thoughts that made our code. We sang hymns in the house, the roof was near God. The light bulb that hung in the pantry made a wan light, but we could read by it names of preserves, outside the buffalo grass and the wind in the night. The sun was over our town, it was like a blade. Kicking cottonwood leaves, we ran towards storms. Wherever we looked, the land would hold us up. You know, people say a lot of things about the Midwest, about it being flat and plain. At least that's what I heard before I moved here. But I'm really always struck by its beauty, and some of it's captured in this poem really well. My friend Donna had another friend, and they both were from the Midwest but left. And after many years away, they said, her friend said, "I'm really tired of hills. They block my view." And having lived in Iowa for 3 years, I really see what she means. When I think of Iowa, I think of this vast, endless, deep, luxurious sky horizon to horizon, the land really holding us up. And I think of the sweetness of the people here, that kind of really, really calm, reliable kindness that really pours through this poem. Finally, what if you have some complex feelings towards your home? Here's a poem by Anthony Art. It's called From South Florida with Love. There's a little profanity in it, so I will censor myself. And apologies if I forget, but I will try my best to remember. From South Florida with Love. South Florida, if you were a body part, you'd be an armpit. You'd be a bulged vein on the side of a forehead, forever locked in a scowl behind sunglasses. You speak the language of horns. Middle name, finger, blood type, combustible. You're a melting that's boiled over the lid, sweating salt water at the brows, eyes red as brake lights in the maddening brightness, your torrential daylight, heating nerves like greenhouse gases waiting for a reason to explode. You're a tropical Molotov cocktail no one can afford, 2 parts anger, 1 part stupidity, melting in place, thirsty for attention, full of yourself a souvenir glass with a toothpick umbrella. You're all image. You're the curse words breaking out the mouths of the angry line mob at Starbucks in the morning. You're the indifferent silence in the arena at the Heat games leaving early, showing up late due to the distance from Brickell to Hyala, West Palm to Pompano, the gap between the entitled and the underpaid, a skyline of condos in a third world country. You've always been foreign to me. You're winterless, no chill. You attract only hurricanes and tourists, shoving anything that isn't profitable out of the way, like the Irma storm debris into the backyards of the Liberty City projects onto Mount Trash Can of the side of the turnpike, hidden behind Bermuda grass lined with palm trees. You're cold-blooded, crawling with iguanas, blood-sucking mosquitoes, parking lot ducks, and people not afraid to get run over. You get yours. You'll go as low as the flat roofs of your duplexes and the incomes that can barely pay the rent to get it. Latitude is attitude, temper is temperature. If you were a body part, I swear you're an south of the brain, 1 hour in all directions, I'd find you. You'd impose your way onto my flight to the Philippines, to Seattle, to Raleigh. You'd follow me like excess baggage, like gravity, bringing me back when asked where I'm from. The area north of Miami, I'd say the suburbs, but whatever, we're hard in our own way. I'd show you off on their map, as if some badge of grit, certificate of aggression. I know how to break a sweat, walk briskly through Walmart parking lots, drive evasive, ride storms in my sleep. I know you. I'd say, he's a friend of mine, Florida, and I'd watch them light up and recount the postcards you've sent them of the sunrise, welcoming brown immigrants onto white sand beaches. You were foreign to us, yet raised us as your own in the furnace of your summers, edges sharpened, iron on iron, the forgers striking softness into swords, built for survival. I am made of you. My South Floridian anger cools down in your ocean breeze. If you were a body part, you'd be part of me, a socked foot in an sandal, pressed to the gas pedal as my drive takes me north of your borders, far from home, you in the rearview mirror, tailgating like a sports car on the exit ramp, the color of the sun. I love this poem for its energy, its irreverence, for how it truly, truly sees home for what it is, with its messiness, its callousness, and all homes have that, with its sharp edges, its bite, what's wrong with it, what needs to be changed, but also for its beauties, for raising us, for really shaping us. It's just such a well-rounded and yet brash and yet beautiful poem. All right, let's end with a writing prompt. If you were to write a letter to your home, what would you say? If you've left your home behind, talk to it. If you're sitting inside your home or with the people that you call home, write to them as if you were seeing them for the very first time. If you haven't found or built your home yet, go ahead and talk to your future home. Promise you will find your way there. Okay, I will set a timer. I will try not to put that shouty police siren timer that I did last. Thank you so much. Um, this was really wonderful. I loved looking for these poems about home, and it kind of helped me figure out what I think and feel about the idea of home too. One of these weeks, I think we should do a an episode on houses specifically, not home, houses, famous houses in literature. And so I'm thinking like Gatsby's house. I'm thinking of Wuthering Heights. I'm thinking of Mandalay Bay from Rebecca. Um, a few houses like that, right? So if you'd like to hear, if you'd like an episode on famous houses in literature, let me know what houses you would like me to include. Feel free to message me. Have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for listening, for writing, for reading with me, and I will see you next week.